Okay, it appears that we are alive. And let me tell you, first of all, before we get started with the various texts, that we're going to re-examine Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol and different people's takes on A Christmas Carol. And we're going to, first of all, start out by talking about what is the crux of the problem in A Christmas Carol. So right now, bear with me while I try to share this so that maybe more people will see our conversation. Okay, I can see our conversation. I can see it now, so I'm going to share it. Okay, and I think that I will bother with all of the other locations where we could share it. So what is the crux of A Christmas Carol? Is it really about Scrooge not liking the Christmas season, not liking other people? Or is it about the ways in which Scrooge looks at saving and allocating resources and not being a spendthrift? So to me, it seems that we're going between two extremes here. Obviously, in fiction, when we try to demonstrate something or to make a point, we tend to exaggerate. We don't go for the middle road. And so nobody in Scrooge, in A Christmas Carol, is actually a middle of the road person. We have extremes, and Dickens comes out on the side of one extreme at the expense of the other. But let me tell you where my affiliation goes. So when I was a young woman and all the other young women were going out on dates and were working at jobs that paid really well and were doing all sorts of things that gave them gratification in the moment, I wrote this poem called Deferred Gratification. And if you want to read it, you can read it in There Can Be Gods, which is an anthology from Inverted A Press. And there are other authors in this anthology. I'm not the only one. But I'm going to read you my poem, Deferred Gratification. I don't believe in afterlife, but I believe there will be life long after mine. I have no faith in an all-knowing God, but neither will I scoff at the divine. I know no higher goal than joy, yet mine is long deferred and dying on the vine. Anticipating happiness, I dream, but if it comes, it will be long past my own time. Some worship ancestors, but I look to the unborn children of my future line. For yes, there can be gods, but we must fashion them from flesh, from guts and brain and spine. Now, I wrote this when I was young, when I was single, before I had a daughter, before I did my research, before I wrote all of my novels. Okay, that's the one side of it. This is the side where you take a child into a room and you offer her a marshmallow. That marshmallow might be sex. It may be a high-paying job in a lawyer's office. It might be any one of those things. And she says, no, I'm holding out for eternal life instead. Okay? But there's the other side to this, and the other side is the person who always goes for the marshmallow. And if you want to hear my take on that at about the same time in my life, then I will read you the All Gone Rule, which is Pearl's song in The Debt Collector. And a lot of people who I think agree with Charles Dickens about everything do not like this song. So listen up, kids, to your dear old dad. I may not be sober, but I ain't half bad. I may not be book learned, but I ain't a fool. So perk up and learn the all gone rule, how things can't be kept, but they sure can be had. Some say you can't eat cake and have it too. Well, here is some crafty advice for you. Cake won't keep, so hurry and eat it. And if you got money, then spend it and beat it, or others will take it away from you. Supposing you've saved up a little nest egg, friends will soon come to threaten and beg. They'll ask for a loan or they'll take it by force. They'll call you a cheapskate. They'll threaten or curse. Far better to drink it and leave them the dregs. Last evening at poker, I made out all right, and I spent it on liquor and women all night. There was none of it left by break a day, none for your mother to take away. I used it on my fun without having to fight her. Remember Claude's birthday? Your mom baked a cake. Dolores kept watch till her move she could make. Into the kitchen went diligent Dolly, and when she was done, she had eaten it all up. All gone were her words when she finally spake. Not all of the food in the world then could sate her, and only a fool tries to save some for later. True, overeating makes stomachs go queasy, but who in the world said that life should be easy? And any complaints, send to God, your creator. Some folks are the kind that on every occasion their money they save, and with great jubilation note how the sum grows in their bank account, savor the increase in dollar amount, not knowing that they lose it all to inflation. Cake will not keep, and neither will cash. So spend it all now, kids. Don't fear to be rash. Live for today, for there is no tomorrow. And if you have need, then you always can borrow. But never you lend, kids, and never you stash. Okay, so that's me on both sides of the equation, on both extremes. And now I'm going to share with you what I thought 10 years ago when I revisited Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. So first off, we're going to see if we can screen share. And the thing that I want to screen share is what I thought. Well, let's see. here we go. Now I believe that we are in fact screen sharing what I wanted to share. If you want to read it yourself, it's on PubWages. It's called A Christmas Carol Revisited, and I'm going to read it for you. A Christmas Carol Revisited, analyzing George C. Scott's Scrooge. And first of all, we are going to read an excerpt from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, said the gentleman, taking up a pen, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessities. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comfort, sir. Are there no prisons? Asked Scrooge. Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman, laying down the pen again. And the union workhouses, demanded Scrooge, are they still in operation? They are. Still, returned the gentleman, I wish I could say they were not. The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigor then, said Scrooge. Both very busy, sir. Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course, said Scrooge. I'm very glad to hear it. Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude, returned the gentleman, a few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for? Nothing, Scrooge replied. You wish to be anonymous? I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. Since you asked me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. And that was the excerpt from the original Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Now we're going to go into the introduction to the article that I wrote 10 years ago. I've never really liked A Christmas Carol. Every time I've tried to read it or have seen it performed, I kind of felt as if it was intended to be a direct slap in the face to me and my parents and the values they taught me. Don't leave the light on. Turn the thermostat down. Don't waste money. Don't have a baby unless you can support it. Those are the things I heard all my life. Scrooge embodies all those values, and when they knock him, they're knocking me. However, last year, because I was hard at work on The Debt Collector, I wanted to watch a performance of A Christmas Carol in order to experience firsthand the kind of mentality I was up against. I was going to take my daughter to see the latest version at the local movie theater, but we somehow missed that. Also, a theatrical version was supposed to be showing in the area, but nothing came of that either. Finally, as a last resort, I went to Walmart and bought 2 videos for the price of one, a sort of package deal. For the adults, there was George C. Scott in the starring role, and for children, there was some cheap cartoon version. I asked Sword which one she wanted to see. Let's watch the grown-up one first, she said. She was trying to be nice about it since she imagined she'd probably like the cartoon better. Scrooge is a model of filial piety. In A Christmas Carol, much is made of Scrooge's miserable childhood. His mother died in childbirth, bringing Scrooge into the world. His father, who loved his mother more deeply than words can tell, was grief-stricken and blamed the infant for the mother's death. As a result, Scrooge knew neither the love of a mother nor the support of an affectionate father figure. The only person who showed him any kindness was his elder sister. Now, in this day and age, most would roundly condemn the father's cruelty. He would be blamed for every failure in Scrooge's life. Scrooge would go into therapy and learn to speak knowingly of abuse and neglect, casting aspersions on his father's good name and dodging responsibility for his own actions. I was abused, he would be taught to say. It's all my father's fault. I can't help it. And yet, when the ghost of Christmas past shows Scrooge his miserable childhood, and he is forced to relive all those painful moments that are best forgotten, Scrooge never says one bad word against his father. He was stern, is the most he can manage. This remarkable stoicism, this refusal to point the finger or shift blame, is something that immediately made Scrooge rise in my estimation. No parent is perfect. Some are better than others, but everyone makes mistakes. To spend your life blaming everything on your parents instead of taking responsibility for your own actions is counterproductive. The virtue of filial piety and of tight-lipped stoicism in the face of soul-crushing adversity is seldom praised, but we know it when we see it, and Scrooge has it in spades. Scrooge is a true gentleman in his dealings with women. Here is the short version of Scrooge's love life. He hasn't got any. The slightly longer version is this. He fell in love with a Belle Fezziwig, and they became engaged. For years, he was satisfied with the engagement, but did not actually wish to marry. She, on the other hand, tired of waiting, called the whole thing off and married somebody else. Scrooge, heartbroken, never stopped loving her, and he never took up with any other woman. The evil spirits of Christmas that plague Scrooge accuse him of selfishness and greed. But let's examine the facts and see who exactly it was who was guilty of greed. Was it the man who asked nothing for himself, who enjoyed Belle's companionship, but did not force himself on her body and soul? Or was it the woman who, the moment it was clear that Scrooge would never marry her, immediately went and found somebody else who would? Did she love Scrooge for himself or only for the things he could give her? Social position, wealth, sex, children. How great was her love? What was she willing to sacrifice for it? How great was his? What degree of self-restraint must it have taken of him not to make demands on her virtue? Don't you think he wanted to sleep with her? Keep in mind the backstory. This was a man who was denied the love of a father because his mother had died giving birth to him. His sister also died young, leaving a motherless boy. In those days, contraception was in its infancy, and pregnancy often followed immediately after marriage. For all women, childbirth was painful and gruesome, and they often emerged scarred. Death in childbirth was not at all uncommon. Did Scrooge refrain from marrying Belle because he did not love her enough, or because he loved her too much to risk killing her? At a time when sex, childbirth, and death were so intimately intertwined, was it not the better man who preferred a platonic relationship over one that might very well destroy the object of his passion? Scrooge, charity, and government. Scrooge is needled for his stinginess, his miserly behavior, and his risk aversion in general. He's a party pooper and a loner, and he doesn't like Christmas. Who doesn't like Christmas? His failure to support consumerism is a point of contention. But the crux of the attack on Scrooge is his attitude toward the poor. When he is pestered by people soliciting for charity, he mentions that he already supports several public institutions whose purpose is to provide for the poor. Why should he contribute more when these fine pillars of society already exist and are funded by his taxes? The solicitors replied that many would rather die than go there. So far, so good. Admittedly, debtor's prison, the poorhouse, and the treadmill, whatever that is, don't sound very inviting. You might think that it's because people in the 19th century were particularly cruel to others in unfortunate circumstances. But in fact, public institutions set up to help the poor are no kinder today. Social workers bully the people they are supposed to serve. Families under their supervision are broken up and destroyed. I've had clients who would rather become prostitutes than go on welfare. The conclusion that logically follows from these all too true facts about public aid to the poor from the Dickens classic is that there should be no such institutions. However, this is not the conclusion that most people draw. Why? Paying for love. It all comes down to love. There's nothing more important than that. Children are love. They are the greatest treasure that anyone can possess. The poor are sometimes quite wealthy if we know how to look the right way. They are blessed with many children. But the thing to remember is this: these are blessings that they have bestowed on themselves. Everyone, rich and poor, has the right to have children. Nobody, rich or poor, has the right to do so at somebody else's expense. Love is a wonderful thing, and it's okay to grab it when the grabbing is good. But there's a price. Who should pay that price? Should it be the person like Scrooge who didn't allow himself to take the risk? Should he pay for somebody else's lovemaking? Or should we each finance our own happiness? Am I Scrooge? Not really. I have two children, one who is biologically mine and one who is adopted. When I sit in the dark and keep the heating costs down, I have them to keep me company, and we snuggle together. But I don't have 10 children, and it's not because I wouldn't like to have 10. I can't afford them, and the earth can't afford them either, so I stick to the two I have. Do you want to help others? By all means do so, but don't try to make other people feel guilty if they want to spend their money on something else. And if they don't want to spend their money at all, then thank them kindly for the huge favor they are doing you. By failing to spend, they are enabling you to buy your Christmas pudding at a reduced cost, because the person who sells the pudding will have to lower the price for lack of buyers. If the moral of a Christmas carol is anything, it is gather your rosebuds while ye may. In other words, do not be risk averse, because tomorrow may never come. Eat, drink, and make merry, tomorrow we die. But the moral that Scrooge urges on us is equally valid. Make merry if you will, but don't expect someone else to pay for your merrymaking. The Dickens Bias. By the way, here's a picture of Dickens. Every person has a bias. The Charles Dickens bias stems from his own experiences early in life and from his own choices later in life. Dickens came from a nice, loving family, but his father spent more than he earned, and consequently, what should have been a happy middle-class childhood was cut short when the family was sent to debtor's prison. What may have made it worse is that Dickens himself was separated from the others and made to work in a blacking factory, a lower-class workplace. And so it was that a pampered boy from the middle class got to see what life was like for those born under less fortunate circumstances. This experience was humiliating and very painful, and it was one of the formative events of Dickens' life. Scrooge is the anti-Dickens. Dickens had a warm, generous nature, and with it, an insatiable appetite for life. Like his father, in his adult life, he was a big spender, but unlike his father, he was able to make his income match his expenditures by writing long, voluminous works for which he was paid by the word. Dickens was a hack, but a very good one. Dickens hated the poorhouse, but he himself actually opened a home for unwed mothers when he hoped to educate these young women to do what he considered better. For someone who hated institutions that looked down on people, it was odd that he would want to found a few of his own to do the same sort of thing. Why should an unwed mother be institutionalized at all? Unlike Scrooge, Dickens had an eye for the ladies, and he didn't keep himself from enjoying the pleasures of the flesh. When an early paramour spurned him, he did not pine away for her forever, but found a nice substitute to marry. His married life was stormy, and over time he lost interest in his wife, but not before she had borne him 10 children. When tired, overweight, and too lethargic to match the vigorous Dickens' energy level, the wife no longer suited, he replaced her with a young actress and went touring the countryside. Dickens was a genuine family man who enjoyed children, but he left most of the details of his children's upbringing to the many women who came to serve him. First his wife, and then her sister came to live with him. He spent money on sumptuous feasts and cozy living arrangements, and then he tried to earn money to cover his expenditures. He was a hard worker, but he was not frugal. I don't mean to begrudge Dickens his pleasures, and when I write this, I don't want to come off as a prude. Dickens was a man like all others, and it was understandable that he had needs which he sought to satisfy. If he had done all this in private and kept his own counsel concerning the behavior of others, I would not even mention it. But a paragon of virtue, he was not. The same extremism that characterizes Scrooge's miserly behavior seems to be found in Dickens, only in the opposite direction. Where Scrooge was stingy, Dickens was generous, and not always with the money he had ready at hand. Where Scrooge was chaste, Dickens was profligate. Where Scrooge kept a tight lip and did not speak ill of his father's misdeeds, Dickens publicized his own father's neglect of duty and insolvency. Where Scrooge strove to lead a life of quiet desperation, asking nothing of anyone and taking only what was his, Dickens was loud and boisterous and constantly asking for sympathy and money and love. Scrooge is the anti-Dickens. In A Christmas Carol, which is a piece of propaganda, if ever a literary work was, Dickens urges the public, don't be like Scrooge, be like me instead. I think most of us would rather not be like either one of them. There is, after all, a middle ground. George C. Scott as Scrooge. The genius of George C. Scott's portrayal of Ebenezer Scrooge is that he plays him as nobly as it is possible to do within a script that is remarkably close to the original. I have seen simpering Scrooges and cowardly Scrooges, but George C. Scott's Scrooge is a strong, brave, virtuous man beset by the ghosts that all of us must face sooner or later. Does he have secret sorrows? Sure. Does he have regrets? Of course. Now that he is no longer young, does he maybe fear the cold, yawning grave that will swallow us all? Definitely. But he's not spineless, and he isn't evil. If you're going to watch some version of A Christmas Carol this holiday season, I strongly recommend this one. The movie came out in 1984 and has been playing on television for ages. Up until recently, this 1984 film classic was not available for purchase on videocassette or DVD because George C. Scott held the copyright in his iron fist, and Scrooge-like would not let it go. but he died in 1999, and now you can buy a copy at Walmart or on Amazon. Our Personal Appraisal. I didn't expect to like the movie as much as I did, but George C. Scott made a truly attractive, heroic figure of a Scrooge. He seemed so nice that I could almost imagine being friends with him and sitting in his dimly lit, unheated, inhospitable house, sharing a bowl of gruel and discussing the welfare state. My daughter appreciated the movie more than I thought she would. She kept jeering at the ghosts throughout the viewing, asking why they didn't just come in through the front door like decent people. She also remarked early on during the bah humbug sequences, he's just like grandma. He doesn't like Christmas either. And this is high praise for my mother and not a put down, by the way. The George C. Scott Scrooge obviously had sore sympathy. The next evening, we watched the cartoon version. In the cartoon, Scrooge was portrayed as a mean, openly malevolent person who foreclosed on mortgages just for the pleasure of putting people out of on the street, and went out of his way to send the poor to debtor's prison, and who spitefully threw things at Tiny Tim to make him sick. Sword exclaimed, Scrooge would never do that. She had decided that George C. Scott was the real Scrooge, and she wasn't buying the cartoon version at all. Let's not watch this, she said. And so we turned it off. And now I'm going to stop the share. I'm sorry that I'm really bad at screen sharing and that it took me a long time to get there, but here we are. Now, I don't know whether we have anybody in chat. That's kind of hard for me to tell. I'm just going to put that there in case somebody wants to chat. Okay, so that was me 10 years ago. That was younger Aya. Why am I reading this to you now? Well, because basically, I wrote everything that I wrote with the idea that it would be read over and over again, even after I die. So this is my deferred gratification. This is my Scroogeness. This is me keeping things for a rainy day that may never come. I don't need to write another article about A Christmas Carol every year. What I need is to make people revisit the old article. I don't need to write a new novel every year. I need you guys to buy the old ones. Then if I have something new to say, there will be a built-in audience. So this Christmas, if you are looking for a book for a child who wants to learn a foreign language, or who has a classmate from a different country who is now just learning English, you might want to order Ping and the Snarkily People. If you are interested in history, if you like Aaron Burr or Jean Lafitte or Theodosia Burr, read Theodosia and the Pirates. If you're interested in Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, or Hannibal of Carthage, or Nabal the Carmelite from the Old Testament, or you like to read about Texas in the 1980s, or you care about what happened to the Branch Davidians, buy and read Vacuum County. Do you know anything about internment camps during World War II? Do you know what's going on in the world right now? Are you interested in Eric Liddell, the runner, and his last few years on Earth? Buy Our Lady of Kython and read it and share it with others and leave a review, hopefully a good one. But even if you leave a bad one, please don't make up stuff that wasn't in the book, okay? All right. So That was me trying to capitalize on the past. I'm not always going to be here. I am not always going to be able to read my writings to you. Someday I'll be gone. But my hope is that the writing will remain and that I wasn't mistaken when I deferred my gratification. Because, yeah, I could have eaten and drunk and made merry just like all the rest of you and had things to show for that. So, uh, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from me and everyone at Inverted A Press. Please buy our books, including those not by me. Please read our poetry, including that not by me. And I will see you next year on the other side if I'm still around.